Yeah, no problem.
Three, 2, 1. Yes, you guys, welcome back. I'm Nini FC, this is Blue Lions TV, and today I'm joined by a very special guest in Joe Tweedie. For me, it's a perfect guest to bring on for tonight, you guys, because I think it's time to have some very, real conversations now about where our season's currently heading at this point in time. Of course, right now, I think the reality is that we have to accept is that we are not title contenders. And I guess the question is, when exactly is that going to happen? And what are the steps that we have to take to get to a point where we are ready to start really competing seriously on all fronts consistently, and not just every few seasons or under circumstances like we tend to see over the past few seasons. So without wasting any more time, Joe, man, thanks for coming on. Of course, let's introduce yourself very quickly to the stream.
Hey, mate. Yeah, it's been a while, actually, isn't it? So, Joe Tweedie, part of the London News Blue podcast family, content creator, I suppose, occasionally on Twitter these days, I suppose is the best way to put it. But yeah, I think it's long overdue to have this sort of conversation, Nini. So I'm very much looking forward to it this evening.
Yeah. Again, man, thank you for coming on. And I guess to get straight into things, of course, as I'm saying, we are not title contenders, and I'm gonna just get you like involved immediately. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I think you can go in quite a few sort of directions there, Nini. I think certainly if you look at the past couple of years, and I know that this is a stat that I talk about often, but from winning the title, we have entered a period where we have finished 30 points, 26 points, 33 points, 19 points last season, currently 12 points behind City, and they've got a game in hand. And that, for me, I think that's kind of where you start looking at where the problems have started, I suppose. When you're talking about title challengers, you're talking about a team that can compete with the one or two best teams in the country, I think, until the last couple of games of the season. Really, obviously, you want to be there or thereabouts in the title race. But if you're looking at things at the moment, I think I'm right in saying that we're on average, kind of 9 wins a season behind City and Liverpool. So about 27 points over that 4-year period, we are behind the eventual champions of England. And I think it comes down to quite a few different reasons, I suppose. But I think the main one has been that we've seen this sort of gravitation towards Chelsea only really being able to compete in one competition, or one major competition, let's put it that way, over the course of a season. Yes, I think we'll get into the recruitment aspect of it, which I think is an absolutely enormous part of why we are where we are. But the quality, I think, within the squad, the way that we have been built over a sustained period, it's quite easy now to sort of see that we can only really compete in one competition properly at a time. And, I think we as fans have obviously taken the Champions League win. And I think a lot of people have, I wouldn't say overrated that success, Nini, but we've certainly taken that to a place in our heads mentally. And I think maybe the club have as well, where we were, maybe one key signing away from being able to compete. But the reality, if you remember back to the back end of last season, we scraped fourth. I think somebody won and we sort of got in fourth place by virtue of not necessarily doing our part of the equation. So, I think it's maybe, I think possibly our fault, and maybe the clubs as well, for taking for granted that to be successful in Europe and to be successful in the Premier League are two very different prospects. And you need, in my opinion, way more than what we've had over the past couple of years in the squad. To sort of actually be able to compete. And ultimately, the league doesn't lie. For me, it's the benchmark of the quality of your team. I think you can go on a run, which we did last season in the Champions League, where we put together some incredible performances back to back. But you have to remember, peppered in between those amazing victories we saw against the likes of Madrid and others, were really poor performances in the league, or very average performances in the league. So when you're talking about why we're not title contenders, I think it's purely because we don't have the the capability, and we haven't had the capability for a particularly long period of time of being able to sustain a series of quality performances over a 38-game season. And before sort of moving on to maybe recruitment and other bits that we'll talk about in a second, but it comes down to, as you say, that ability to be great over that period of time. You can't draw the amount of games we have. You can't lose the amount of games we have. This season we've dropped 13 points from winning positions. Those 13 points put us above City in the table. We don't have the same mentality. We don't have the same killer instincts that we've seen in Chelsea sides in the past. In terms of closing out wins and closing out, important games. And, that has not been a feature that's prominent under Tuchel. But all the way back to Conte's second season, Maurizio Sarri, Frank Lampard, Thomas Tuchel, these are all, depending on who you rate and who you don't rate. But all four of these managers have at times spoken about the quality in the squad. They've spoken about the mentality of the squad. I remember that famous quote from Frank Lampard when he was asked whether Chelsea could win the league.
Yeah.
And as a squad, he said, as a squad, we're not there. And he got mocked for that. He got lambasted for that. But I don't think he was wrong when he was saying that. So, Lampard made the assessment. I think Sarri's made the assessment. I think Conte has made the assessment before that. And I think Tuchel is now realising this season that with the way the squad is composed, the depth that we have, or the depth that people were saying Chelsea had in the early parts of the season, has proven to be a bit of a myth. And ultimately, you have to have that quality depth, quality in numbers. But also first team quality in the team as well to really push on and try to be a title contender, which is something which we've really struggled with. For not just this season, but you could say if we finish double digits away from City again, that's the fifth year in a row where we finish double digits. I don't know what the gap will be. And just for context, just to round out this final point here, that horrific season where we finished 10th in the Premier League. We finished 31 points of the title winners that season. We finished more than that in some seasons, and we finished closer to that in the past 3-4 seasons while getting in the top four. So while we may have closed the gap in terms of being better than the rest of the teams in the Premier League, that gap to the top teams has existed for an awfully long period of time. We've not really successfully closed it on any of them.
And essentially, you feel like one of the main reasons behind this failure we're seeing recently is because the personnel and the squads aren't of that required level to be able to compete in all fronts like that.
Yeah, so I think where the club has, I think we've had success jumping from coach to coach, and we've had that kind of short-term bump, and we've had the ability for coaches to come in and very quickly make changes and make something out of what the existing personnel are. That is very much to me the hallmark of, I know we're going to talk about it in a second, but the hallmark of a cup side or a team that is very good in kind of knockout or one-off games. What we don't have, and where you start looking at the comparisons to a City or to a Liverpool, we haven't had that sustained period in our recent history where we have a coach or a philosophy or a series of principles or whatever you want to call them that have extended beyond 3, 4, 5 years. And the fact that then, in terms of your recruitment, you look at the squad at the moment, and I think one of Tuchel's biggest issues is that he can't build a style of play that suits the entire squad because, you take Reece James and Ben Chilwell out of the team, it completely, devolves the ability for us to use our wing-backs. N'Golo Kante's injuries this season and his form, and just I think the fact that he's not necessarily the same player he was last season, that massively and drastically changes the way that your midfield can play. The sort of the chopping and changing of centre backs because of injuries and COVID and the lack of fluidity, and bringing in Lukaku and how that has massively affected the dynamics, etc. I think what we're seeing is, again, and I know actually if anybody is a familiar listener to you and I talking on your channel, this is a similar conversation that we've had historically for the past number of years, is that we don't have any sort of alignment when it comes to recruitment or a direction for the club. And while, yes, people go, well, we've won trophies, we've won this, we've won that. To build a period of sustainable success, build repeatable success, and perhaps that's the better term, repeatable success, you have to recruit and you have to be able to bring in players that will fit the coach, the direction, the style of play for 2, 3, 4, 5 seasons. Because you look at City now, they're in a period where they can go and cherry pick a £100 million player in the summer. And that's a level out. We are.
They never panicked when they didn't replace Aguero, and they're still free scoring.
Yeah, still free scoring, still have the ability to score goals. They know exactly who they are. They know their identity, and it's the same with Liverpool. Mohamed Salah is probably the X factor that raises them to be able to compete with City, but they still have recruited and been able to bring in players, and they have embedded in a playing style and philosophy that has been there for a number of years with Jurgen Klopp. I think with Chelsea, when you lurch from an Antonio Conte system to a Maurizio Sarri system to Frank Lampard back to Thomas Tuchel, there's nothing really connecting those managers in terms of playing shapes, in terms of playing styles, in terms of principles, in terms of really sort of the kind of way they want to play. And therefore, you would imagine that then they would be interested in slightly different players, or they would want kind of different profiles in terms of the recruitment. So again, I think Tuchel's at a position now where he has lost a number of key first team players. And we are seeing players that have historically, over the past number of years, yes, they've contributed to Chelsea winning the Champions League, and yes, they've contributed to winning trophies here and there. But when we're talking about Premier League success, we're talking about, again, 38 games, being able to sustain a very high level over that period of time. This is the most competitive that the Premier League has ever been. Probably the best level. You're looking at teams like Brentford and Brighton have the ability to play a lot of really, really top teams or big names off the park these days. And the fact that I think, again, as you say, when it comes to the recruitment, when it comes to that personnel side of things, we just haven't had that sustained period where it said, for 4 years, this is what we're aiming for. This is the end goal. These are the kind of players you want to bring in. Even if they're young players, you want to maybe bring a young player in, put him in the squad for a season, groom him, and then have him become a top player. A bit like a Foden or maybe somebody like a Silva or a Jesus at City that they've sort of eased their way in, and they they play their various roles to different degrees. Foden may be more of a starter, etc. But he's been groomed to be a starter. You can't plan for the future when you don't know what that future is going to look like. So if you're bringing in a young midfielder because he has X, Y, Z traits that you really like, the next manager may want a passer there. The next, somebody else may want a destroyer. They may want a box-to-box guy there. That massively impacts obviously your ability to build a squad, because you don't really know where the end goal is. The end goal could be any position on a map. At the moment, not having that direction set by the club, in my opinion, and believing in a coach and instilling a coach for a period of time that allows them to create that philosophy. We just don't have the direction. And I think the other thing as well on the recruitment, just to sort of round off the recruitment point, we seem to get an awful lot of our big money moves wrong. And
so many times. And
it gets to a point where you have to look at, you look at the money spent on the attack. Just, I'm not picking on the attack because it's a sort of a popular thing, but Lukaku, Pulisic, Havertz, Werner, Ziyech is about £300 million worth of talent. And then when you actually think of the performances, you think at the sort of return we're getting from them, it doesn't even sort of get anywhere near that level of money spend. And I think one of the things that we always talk about privately is about, in terms of scouting and how Chelsea's recruitment department works, whether they are really looking at players and determining whether they actually fit in the Premier League. And I think one of the, again, not picking on Timo Werner here, but it takes, 15 minutes on YouTube to see where the majority of his, majority of his goals come from. Counter-attacking, large amounts of space, running into space, running onto the ball, playing on the shoulder. Also to identify that he doesn't have a particularly fantastic touch, that his dribbling is a little bit haphazard.
A little bit is putting it slightly.
I'm being kind in many respects, but looking at those skills and how he scores his goals and how he gets his assists, surely there are people that can then look at how Chelsea play. There are maybe 2 teams in the league that we can counter-attack or play, with some sort of space in behind. Most other teams, or maybe 15 teams in the Premier League, will sit on the edge of the area. They'll put a bank of 4 in front of them, and they'll have a forward pressing, for example. How are we making the evaluation that a guy who has almost exclusively been successful in Germany, that's no question, very successful in Germany, but playing in space, playing in against teams who defend high, playing teams who allow you to counter, allow you to run into space, build momentum. How does that translate to Timo Werner picking up the ball and having 5 people in front of him? And it's the same for lots of players as well. You could say, in terms of the Lukaku move, for example, maybe this is something to say for a little bit later, but if you want to play a counter-pressing or pressing system where your forward is sort of the trigger man up front and he does a lot of the pressing, and then your 2 number 10s follow suit and the midfield pushes up, etc., you don't go and spend £100 million on Romelu Lukaku. This is a guy that has had enormous amounts of success playing in a counter-attacking system in Italy under Conte. A guy who, to be honest with you, is better suited in that system because it conserves his energy for those sprints that you want him to have, so he can win those duels, so he can win the ball and he can actually break through. Asking him to effectively post up and be this kind of like Olivier, £100 million Olivier Giroud type player, that's again, how have we come to the conclusion that if this is the kind of profile of forward we want, i.e., maybe somebody who can press, somebody who can fashion their own chances, who has a good touch, who can help with link play, who can drop deep, who can do all these sorts of things that Kai Havertz was starting to do at the back end of last season. How have we gone from let's look at this kind of player to Romelu Lukaku? And this is again why I'm talking about recruitment has to be aligned, and you really have to think about how the player fits into the Premier League. You look at Chelsea's forwards recently, and I look at other players in the Premier League, we seem to have an enormous inability to retain possession in the final third. It's great having wonderful dribblers and having really technical players, but you have to have a degree of strength in the Premier League. You have to be able to ride challenges. You have to be able to play a little bit back to goal. It doesn't matter if you're a winger or if you're, a guy who wants to be like a Salah or a wide forward. Salah is built. Salah can withstand all of the pressure that any Premier League fullback or wingback is going to put on him. He can ride challenges. He's strong enough to get there. I look at guys like Pulisic and to some degree Ziyech in terms of the amount of possession that they will concede in the final third. I think a lot of that just comes down to a lack of physical skill set. And again, it's not reducing the Premier League to a sort of pace and power league, but you do need to have a degree of physicality to be successful. Even the very, very best players in the league, and I'm probably looking at Salah at the moment, is one of the most underrated guys when it comes to physicality. He's such a strong and physical and powerful
body
player.
Strength. He's really well.
Exactly. Yeah. He's absolutely crazy. You look at City's success. Raheem Sterling and guys like that who are maybe smaller, but they can ride challenges. They have that burst of acceleration. They have that ability to press. They can take the physical game. And going back to players that we've had, Eden Hazard used to get kicked from pillar to post. He could play back to goal on the wing. He could post up a defender. He could roll them, etc. But I feel now that we're so far removed from what is successful and what has made Chelsea successful in the Premier League historically, but also what works today in terms of getting the right combination of technical players that have physical traits. That it does feel like the whole push to build this attack, to take players into the team that just have technical qualities, is actually making us a lot less likely to challenge City. You look at City's composition of teams. Laporte is an absolute unit. Diaz is a unit. Kyle Walker is one of the most impressive athletes in the league. Okay, Rodri isn't particularly quick, but he's tall, he's physical, he can retain possession. Grealish is obviously a standout example of an attacking player with great physical quality. They have them throughout their entire team in key positions. Whereas you look at sort of our team through sort of the spine of the team, and I know this is a little bit more of a pet hate here, but when you're seeing guys like Azpilicueta marking 6'5" centre backs from Brighton on corners, then surely there is some concern in terms of the physical traits that Chelsea have in the team there. So yeah, it's a combination. I said I think we've made a lot of haphazard and sort of hodgepodgey recruitment decisions where we don't really have a direction. We're just getting players in without really thinking about where we want to be in 2-3 years' time. And then the other thing as well would be that we are spending very, very big money on players that aren't delivering. And I think a lot of that is purely because we're not doing the sort of the due diligence that you would want on the players, and asking the question, are they physically capable of handling Premier League football, and will the skills that we are seeing, will they translate to Premier League football in a system that Chelsea are likely to play? Like
if you guys look on screen right now, I'm on transfermarket.com. Some of our most expensive signings in our history, of course, Lukaku, basically 103 mil. You can have the top 10. That top 10 includes Kepa, 72 mil, our third biggest signing. Alvaro Morata. You're looking at guys like Torres, Pulisic. You can see, we're overspending and we're not getting that same return.
How many of them are successful? Have been? We're talking about real success, not big moments.
You look at the top 20. You're going to see Shevchenko's there. You're going to see Bakayoko's. You're going to see Batshuayi's. You're going to see Danny Drinkwater's in the top 20. Of course, more than N'Golo Kante. It's just like this kind of sums up our, how we do business. Unfortunately, and
we spend the money, Nini. We clearly spend the money. Yeah. We have the money to spend. We spend the money, but we're spending it poorly, and we're not in a position now where we have, when you had, 10 years ago, when you had your JTs, your Drogbas, your Lampards, your Essienes, your Balaks, whoever it's, Coles, you had all these wonderful players. You could get away with buying a really rubbish player because 9 times out of 10, the rest of the quality in that squad would elevate them and would probably pull them through in games. Whereas you think now, Havertz, I'm still undecided on, but in terms of his output and return, goals and assists wise, and again, I am purely reducing him to goals and assists just to make a point here, but that return certainly hasn't been good enough. Lukaku hasn't played well enough this season. Pulisic is missing one in 3 games to Chelsea since he's come here. Misses games and then takes ages to get up to speed. Again, doesn't have anywhere near the level
and he doesn't have his set position now too.
Exactly.
And even touching on what you're saying upon like Havertz and Co. I mean, when we signed Havertz, he got 18 goals and 9 assists. When we signed Lukaku, he got 30 goals, 13 assists throughout the season. Something like a Ziyech got like 9 goals and 20 assists. Werner, for God's sake, 34 goals. Was it 22 assists, something like that? I mean, we signed a lot of players that had a very high output when it came to, goal contributions. And these were players that were playing a significant, key main match-winning role at their previous clubs. And it just feels like, as you're saying, we haven't really assessed the situation. Partly probably comes down to not having really that set philosophy where we get attracted to the names, the numbers, the figures without really thinking about what's the overall plan to get them all playing together and finding a structure for them. And I guess ultimately comes down to something I think we've been saying now for years and years consecutively, and that's not having that set philosophy. And I'm actually going to ask you, is a club going to be more their chances to win, is that going to grow dramatically if you have a set philosophy in which then you update the players every 3 to 5 seasons to just keep that same football, but then you're swapping the players around to maintain that momentum and that intensity? Or is it better to do what we do and you're kind of going for the it manager of the moment who's found a successful model and then trying to just poach some of that and hope that it works for you?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Nini. I suppose it kind of depends what sort of football club you want to be. And, it's very easy to point at Manchester City and Liverpool in particular for teams that have, certainly Liverpool, really backed the manager and backed the philosophy and backed the long-term vision, because, it's quite easy to forget that during Klopp's first, couple of years at Liverpool, it wasn't this rosy. It wasn't as spectacular as what we're seeing now when it comes to how they play, the style of play, their success. They're like a machine in terms of their output. City maybe more so when you're looking at a team that has, even before the arrival of Guardiola, with all of the Barcelona staff that moved there before Guardiola to put the foundations in. They're perhaps the best example of having a club-wide philosophy, completely sticking to it for absolutely everything. And yes, you can point to the fact that, they've not won the European Cup and all that sort of stuff. But I think we know from experience that you don't always have to be the best team in Europe to win that competition. I thought we were the best team in the competition last season. Didn't necessarily think that we were the best team in Europe, if that sort of makes sense. In the competition, we were outstanding, but I still felt that we were a level below the teams in the Premier League. So I think when it comes to City, they have that foundation now where I think even if Guardiola does go, they have such an amazing infrastructure around the club when it comes to recruitment, when it comes to the coaching through their academy, when it comes to the ability to put a squad in, the vision that they have. That I feel like they could go and grab a similar manager or somebody with similar principles, come in, and they would still be incredibly successful in terms of how they would want to be. I think Liverpool now, they have become the identity of Jurgen Klopp, and maybe that's the other extreme where they buy into the manager so much, and everything is geared towards.
And I guess they had to in their circumstances, because it wasn't like they were even challenging for titles or anything before Klopp. So and again, that was smart for them.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, they found the manager that they really liked, that they really bought into, and they gave him the period of time necessary to obviously deliver a Champions League, but also to break their duck in the Premier League and to win a Premier League title. And they both have very, very similar. Well, the similar theme there obviously is that it's time, and that commodity of time is not something that we always necessarily see at Chelsea. We start a project where we looking at players, this particular kind of player, and then because it doesn't work, we blow it up and we go back to another player or another way of doing it. And when that doesn't work, we blow it up and we go back to a different style of coaching. And it always amuses me that when you think about Chelsea's managerial appointments, and I think we are a club that is more in the Liverpool model where we buy perhaps too much into the image of the manager rather than trying to set our own club direction. But to go from Andre Villas-Boas' style to Di Matteo to Benitez to Mourinho to Sarri, back to Lampard to Conte in between there to Sarri, to Lampard to Tuchel, there's no continuity there at all.
There's no continuity at all, and it's just like you're just setting yourself up for failure in the long term, because ultimately we don't have the type of money to be able to sustain a model like this forever with the ambition to still competing. And a part of me also thinks as well, I think to myself, what is the reason behind why maybe Marina and her strategy in the market and the board is always to be so cost effective at times. I mean, other than that 17-18 season where we really overspent on some mediocrity that we are still paying the price for to this day. I just think to myself, there must be a reason as to why we won't take those, calculated risks and gambles when it comes to maybe overspending a bit on players that you might need to spend the money on, knowing that in the long term you're going to be good for that eventually. And I think, it's literally due to this, hire and fire nature we've had, overspending on players. If I'm being cynical, sometimes I think that we've kind of overspent on our success, considering the money we've spent, like over $1 billion. Maybe you're thinking for a few more trophies and, a bit more consistency compared to many a season where we've been in that transition year where everything kind of just, falls to shit essentially. Then we have to rebuild for another season, and then, every now and then, a trophy's going to be nice. It's going to be cool to, I guess, keep the figures happy on the top. But I just think for me, structurally, it has to come from the top. You need to have the right figures there because it trickles down. You reflect your owners. And if I'm being really, really cynical right now, if I'm being honest with you, a part of me will think sometimes, is it really any surprise or we're kind of built like this when maybe Brownman's just kind of giving the keys to the club to his former assistant, all his friends, all his cronies, the people that is close to them. When you compare that to Man City, Sheikh Mansour, he didn't just give that to family relatives or decide that was going to be his next vanity project. No, he hired the right people. They had a plan in place. They wanted Pep Guardiola. And they made sure that they would work towards building the foundations and infrastructure. Trust them and ties Pep Guardiola to let him know, listen, I know what your concerns are. We've got this for you. You have this amount of money now. If you mess up, of course, it'll be out the door. But we have faith in you. And this is why, and we've proven that. We've shown that towards you. And, City, of course, don't have the Champions League titles we have. But would it be crazy to think that, let's say in the next, 50 years, because I don't see City going anywhere anytime soon, at this rate, they could catch up to us and surpass us maybe. And they'll do it in a lot more cost-effective way as well too. I mean, am I sounding a bit too cynical with how I'm seeing maybe Broman's running of the club, the people he's given power to. I look at someone like Marina. I remember stories like when Mourinho was the manager that we brought back for the second time. He was in ties of the sports cars, and Marina really sold him to the return back to Chelsea. And I guess for someone who doesn't really have that type of sporting football expertise in that sense, you're thinking a big name like Mourinho. I guess if this is corporate life or something, that's going to look pretty good on your resume, and that's going to give you a lot of clout for securing something like that. But sport is completely different to corporate life, and I just feel like in the end, after his tenure was over, everything he worked towards, getting your De Bruyne's, getting your Salahs, getting all these guys, being lots of competition from these guys, and getting their first dibs really early. That was a project, a vision that just went to shit. Did nothing with that essentially. Yeah. And that the pursuit of short term was in everyone's eyes again. And I just think I just keep seeing that same repeated pattern. I see that with how we conduct ourselves in the transfer market. I see that with maybe guys like Scott McCaglin and other figures there who maybe I don't have enough information on it, but I just can't help but feeling like there's a lot of yes men here trying to just climb up the corporate ladder, keep the position secure as well too. I mean, really nonsense stories like what Sal was looked at over the past 2 years. I'm just thinking, what the hell were you looking at then over the past 2 years? That makes no sense to me. You're looking at Tchouameni and you're thinking that he needs another year, but then you saw the same Saul. I mean, these contradictions have kind of been the story of us over the past few years now, and I can't help but feel like this is what happens when you don't really have a proper sporting director and real footballing people at the top who know when to make the right calls, the right judgment, when to release players, when to let them go. You know what I mean? It feels like everything's run too corporate, in my opinion.
It's interesting that that you mentioned the corporate angle there, because anyone listening who has worked in a corporate environment will know that you have sort of things like annual appraisals and performance reviews. And I was sort of just picturing, as you were talking, the review of Scott McLachlan and the international scouting division or whatever it is called that he leads. So the first point I want to make, I don't think, and I certainly think the way that the owner has acted over the course of the pandemic and stuff like that, I don't think his interest in Chelsea or desire to be the best has waned. What I do feel is that I think where he obviously at the moment is unable to get into the country, I think there are certain people at the club, and I'm looking at particularly in the sort of recruitment areas here, who have got away with really some pretty horrible recommendations over the past number of years. And this isn't a hatchet job on anyone who's working at the club, but the fruit is the proof is in the pudding. You look at the players that we have bought. Edward Mendy was attributed to Petr Cech. Ben Chilwell was attributed to Frank Lampard. Thiago Silva said he came to the club because of Frank Lampard. You look at a lot of the better players we signed. And again, it's very easy to cherry pick and say, well, all the good players that come from the manager. But we're talking about well-placed sources here and people that have connections at Chelsea saying that this is sort of relatively true in terms of their understanding. So, when you sort of remove some of those really good signings we've made, and as you say, the concerning one was the comments and the points that came out about Sal when, the day that I think this McLaughlin interview dropped, where he was saying, he's the missing piece. I've been looking at him for 2 years and all this sort of stuff. I think Sal went on a Twitch stream with a Spanish guy and said he said he hadn't played well for 2 years. So you've got, I'm talking literally the same day.
I saw that same stream. I know what you're talking
about.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you're talking about a guy here who is probably one of the most key people at the club in terms of advising, Marina Granovskaya on who or who not to buy. Again, the notion that she sits on Y-Scout or YouTube or Football Manager or whatever and is picking up players. She's listening to advice. I think that's probably where we're talking about club structure. Yeah. We haven't got, in my opinion, the quality of scouting system in that we should have. And even if it is purely data and it's purely video analysis and it's not that much in-person scouting, you should be able to look at a player and determine whether they have some sort of stylistic compatibility to the Premier League. And you look at all of the signings we've made over a period of time, and yes, some of them will be vanity purchases. Maybe Lukaku, maybe HAVERTZ, for example, seem to be big enough purchases where maybe somebody like McLaughlin wasn't involved. But then you look at guys like Saul, you look at guys like Ross Barkley, that was absolutely 100% somebody that was recommended, via those means. We saw the reports at the time, we saw the information coming out. The deals that are not obviously coming from a manager or coming from above a manager in terms of, above Marina as well, they're not particularly great. And you can't consistently get things that wrong if you're meant to be, heading up the scouting department for a club that has ambitions to be the best in the world. So I think when you're looking at any football club, Nini, ultimately, the most important thing about any football club is the 11 players that you put on the pitch to win the match. We can talk about philosophies and we could talk about all this sort of architecture around the team. But if you cannot find top players and you cannot buy top players and you cannot scout top players and you cannot recruit to the level that is needed, then you're never going to be anywhere. And you just look at Manchester United, look at their fall from grace for being maybe, talking about domination of the Premier League. They were an absolute institution. You look at how far they have fallen, primarily because since Ferguson's gone, in my opinion, the people who are doing their recruitment, Woodward when he was there in terms of the negotiations, all that sort of stuff, they fell so far from grace when it came to being able to identify talent, that they are in the position they are in now. Paying £80 million for a human fridge in Harry Maguire, exactly Ronaldo. You're looking at all these terrible players. Guys like Fred, who was meant to be a Fernandinho kind of player, who couldn't tie Fernandinho's boots, for example. And the thing is, we're not quite. Well, obviously we're nowhere near United's level. I think we're a much better team than they are at the moment. But it doesn't take too many years of continually getting it wrong to drain the club of all of the talent it has and have players coming in who are at Sal's level now, who are at the level of some of the signings we've made over the past 3, 4, 5 seasons. And the thing is, to get back to the City level, we're talking about domestically, and even Liverpool here, we don't have that X factor player, and we don't really have the quality of player that's going to play. I mean, again, you can make the argument, well, if Chelsea could field their first choice 11 every single game of every single week, it's not how football works. In modern football, given that you've got 3 subs, you need a first 14. You need 14 players that can literally play to the standard of a title-winning team every single week. When you rotate out, or you lose Reece James and you lose Ben Chilwell, and the backups are Marcos Alonso and Cesar Azpilicueta, for all the respect and all that they've earned for winning titles and being captain, etc., the stylistic difference, the drop-off in quality has completely and utterly fundamentally changed how Chelsea play. And even if you have guys in the squad who can do a good impersonation or a good impression or be the Diet Coke version of Reece James or, or Ben Chilwell, that is much more preferable than having a lot of veteran players or players who don't necessarily fit the style of play or are capable of playing that style. When it comes back to, again, you're talking about recruitment, Chelsea have probably maybe two halves of the squad here. You have a part of the squad that has to play in a back three formation because that's the only formation that they really feel comfortable in. Can't play a back four. They lack the athleticism. Maybe they lack the individual skill set to play in that sort of system. And then you've got a second half of the squad who are probably better in a back four system, whether that's a 3 or 2 or whatever you want to say in midfield. Because you've got natural fullbacks, you've got natural number 8s in midfield, you've got natural wide players who play as wingers, not as inside forwards, etc. So you can't then build, as I said earlier on, you can't build a style of play knowing that you have almost this complete split in the camp when it comes to style of play. Because if you gear it towards one side of the team, like we kind of did, we geared it towards Reece James, we geared the team selection towards towards Ben Chilwell, we geared it towards Kante being fit.
Yeah.
And as soon as those players drop out,
that's it.
Then you spent the first however many months of the season building up a style of play that the guys who are coming in to replace them cannot replicate whatsoever. And this is essentially where we are now as a squad. That the difficulties we are seeing is because the guys who are coming in to replace the absolute starters in that system that we were starting to see emerge second half against Newcastle are just not able to play in the same way. And as I say, we're not talking about having Reece James and then the clone of Reece James as the backup, but we're talking about somebody that can do similar things, can play in a similar manner.
Yeah.
And we've lost that ability. You look at Liverpool, they lost Robinson for a bit, didn't they? They bought that. Is it the Greek guy? I can't remember the guy's name.
Tsimikas.
Yeah, came in, very, very similar guy, up and down, great engine. Not as good as Robinson, but he could play the role in the same way. They bought on a chap against who is it? Arsenal in the cup recently. I think Nico Williams. I think the guy's name is for Trent. And again, beating players, getting crosses in, being that wide player, being a similar right back in terms of style and profile. That's how you can build a team, and that's how you can build a successful squad. At the moment, we have such diverging profiles and such different kinds of players in different areas. I mean, you even look at the midfield trio that Chelsea start. The combination of Cover and Jorginho is completely different to Cover and Kante, which is completely different to Jorginho and Kante, both in terms of build-up, in terms of how they defend, how well they can defend in space, their attacking quality, the way that they can pass, the way that they initiate attacks, the speed in which they initiate attacks. So how are you meant to build up or be able to build up a consistent picture of moving the ball from the defensive third through to the attacking third when you can't even judge the tempo of play that's going to be in midfield in front of you from week to week? So all of these sorts of questions that come in, and that maybe is a very technical example, but that's the kind of example that a City or a Liverpool are kind of building towards, is having those stylistically similar players.
Yeah.
But yes, quality isn't always going to be there because you have better players. But bringing in like a Naby Keita or somebody to deputise to one of their midfielders, he's going to do a pretty similar job. And we just don't have that at the moment.
Nah, we don't. And it's getting a bit concerning that there seems to be no instant reactions to remedy these issues straight away. Again, you don't have the right footballing people at the top there. You don't have the right advice. I mean, how are you going to get business done? I mean, we've seen many examples of times where we've, messed up big money signings. I look at Alisson, for example, and then seeing that pure reactionary signing and like Kepa for ridiculous money, ridiculous wages, ridiculous contracts as well too, and contract length. You pay the price for that long term in the future, and that stops you then from addressing certain squad areas in the team. I mean, I always find it really ironic that for the past 3 seasons we've been religiously seeing transfer stories linking Emerson and Alonso with moves away. I mean, even offered Alonso as part of the deal to sign Lukaku, which, we make like 10 bids for players, and then we waste a lot of time and fluff with offers that clubs really aren't going to accept like that. And he's still on the wage book, and it means that everyone keeps forgetting you don't rely on your first team guys forever. They can't play the course of a season consistently.
Can't play 60 games.
To times like Christmas time in January when you're playing. I mean, we've played in 59 days, 18 games in like 59 days. It's a ridiculous amount.
Yeah.
We'll get onto that later on. But that tells you that you're going to have to rely upon your squad, because every successful title-winning team has to rely upon their squad. And the only time where we got away with that was under Antonio Conte, when we had a game
European
of the
football,
because we didn't have Champions League football, which helped us quite a lot. And that was the difference. That was the reality. It's It does frustrate me, when you see certain positions not being fulfilled. So I'm looking at midfield. We've needed someone for Kante for years and years and years and years and years.
Nemanja Matic.
Exactly, Matic as well hasn't been replaced, and it's just like you can't. We've been relying on like these cheat code players for too long, like Eden Hazard's. His individual brilliance. The guy was just, he'd make any system shine no matter what. Any type of game, he'd be a difference maker. And he's the type of guy who has the rare ability of making his teammates around him perform better because of what he can do on the field, the space he makes, etc., etc. And another guy we have now is N'Golo Kante. Kind of criminal for me that he wasn't even nominated. Really like that for the season he had. Without him, we aren't winning the Champions League whatsoever.
Oh, not at all.
Masterclasses in the final and against Real Madrid, and a big game player that stands out in the big moments. And we always feel that's enough to have one, when it's not. You need to supplement these guys. You need to bring that longevity there. And I definitely know you have thoughts on Kante. I know there's an option that you would like to see at this club in Tchouaméni, and I really think we'd all want to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, Tchouaméni is a guy that I think probably I mentioned him a long time ago now, it feels like, but probably since his days at Bordeaux. I like a lot of the talent in France and Bruno Guimaraes. Lyon is also another player that I'm very, very keen on as well in terms of the quality. But when you're looking at a replacement, or possibly in the future that somebody could be an upgrade on N'Golo Kante, you're looking at a guy here in Tchouaméni who has incredible tackles and interception numbers. He has that athleticism and that drive and that sort of aggression that I think we've really lacked in midfield for a very long period of time. And also what I love about him in particular, when he plays PSG, when he plays the bigger teams in France, he always tends to have a very, very good performance. Last season, I think in particular, created a goal for Fabregas. I think he had just had an absolutely outstanding game where he bossed a very strong PSG midfield. And this is a guy that, as Nini alluded to earlier, was reportedly said by people in Chelsea's recruitment department that he needed another season in France. And yet again this season, I think he's top 5 in tackles, top 5 interceptions, but also top 5 in progressive carries and passes into the final third. And he's not just this sort of destroyer or destructive player. He's a real technician as well. And his days at Bordeaux, and even times in a Monaco shirt, he can be a deep line playmaker. At Bordeaux, he was a guy who used to sit and used to spray passes left and right, and he was a real dictator of the game. Since he's been at Monaco, he's added a lot more of a sort of box-to-box quality to his game there. But when you're talking about a player that somebody like you're talking about Thomas Tuchel coaching ability here, a guy who has made players who I felt had completely and utterly, I dismissed them as Chelsea players. He's made them into or gotten performances out of them that I didn't think were possible. Give him a player like Tchouaméni, the raw clay that Tchouaméni is, and you're looking at possibly somebody who could become one of the best midfielders in the world. He's certainly one of the best young midfielders in the world at the moment, current League One Player of the Year. And I think he just has that Kante skill set. The interceptions, the tackles, the quickness across the ground, the ability to cover space, the ability to defend in space, to defend transitions, to drive and break forward with the ball. He's probably a better technical player than Kante, and that's not a slight on Kante, but Tchouaméni has got, he's got sauce, he can dribble, he's got some moves that he sort of shows in midfield. He's got a nice drop of the shoulder, great under pressure. He's the player that I would love Chelsea to sign, and he wouldn't necessarily solve all of the problems, but having somebody in Chelsea's midfield that actually can sprint up and down box to box all game, that can actually be explosive and dynamic, I think would be an enormous game changer. Plus, as I say, he has that ability to build. He can be a passer. He has a lot of qualities that I think, again, give him to Thomas Tuchel, and then you're going to see again another sort of evolution of him as a player.
Yeah, I mean, let's pray to the high heavens that finally, summertime we can get this deal done. But I do have a super chat, Frank Samasi. Big fan, Nini. You work great, girls, and match. Keep up the good work. Really appreciate Frank's long time viewer, subscriber. I've been seeing you guys here for a while. I appreciate that a lot. But yeah, I just think ultimately, man, we need to have someone that's gonna allow Kante to get more longevity. For too long, I've been upset by the fact that he's been overused repeatedly.
He got injured.
Every man should do that.
Yeah, he got injured in the first minute of the Brighton game. I don't know if other people saw this, but he ran and he pulled up and he was sort of walking around gingerly. And then he proceeded to have, I think, again, not being particularly harsh in Kante, but probably one of the worst games I've seen him play in a Chelsea shirt, just in general.
That great.
Half a yard off the pace. And the thing with Kante, and this is where I'm getting, as you say, a bit concerned with his sort of like load management, the amount of minutes that he's playing. You know, when do we ever see him miss out on a 50-50 when the ball's like a yard away from him? That insane acceleration he has, he always gets a toe on the ball. You know, so I was watching him yesterday, and there were moments during the game where he was losing tackles that he never loses, that he was actually not getting to the ball when he absolutely would as well. So again, I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, the repercussions from that game is that he's not fit to play, you know, come the weekend, because he did look ginger, or he did look like he was hobbling and walking around a bit gingerly early days. But then obviously moving forward, I think he's going to, be somebody that is possibly at risk here. But to your point, yes, somebody like Tchouameni or a player of that ilk is absolutely needed to improve the longevity. And you know, again, you look at somebody like Claude Makelele when he was here. We brought in Essien and Mikel, and then Makelele would be, you know, big game player. We'd put him out at the right moments. We extended his playing career while also giving the ability to impart that knowledge to a Mikel, to an Essien on how to play the role and have that sort of mentorship as well. You can prolong top players' careers by actually getting them a young understudy or somebody who can actually play the role, or even play ahead of them in certain games. But then you get the added benefit of having that mentor kind of role, that tutelage as well. So, you know, get him in, or get somebody like him in the summer, have him with Kante, and then get that sort of connection going. Because again, I think we've seen with Thiago Silva how much impact he's had on somebody like Trevor Chalobah, for example. Having that relationship, I think, is very important, and I would see Kante in that role going forward if we were to manage his minutes, because at the moment, overplaying him, rushing him back from injury, being dependent basically on him when we play a team that has anyone in their midfield that can run at all. Having to have him in there for security purposes is not going to see him, be here for 2, 3, 4 years, for example.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, let's pray, because, we'll be nothing with Kante. And I also hope that Kante will never be in a position where he feels that maybe it's time for a change or anything like that, because then it will take us forever to recover in midfield, to be honest. But I think now, man, it's probably a good time now to, maybe turn attention towards Thomas Tuchel. But before we do that, I do have another super chat. Got Reyes. Hey man, how you doing? Would you replace Ziyech and Pulisic with Antony and Chiesa? Joe, I'll let you answer that really quickly. Would you replace Ziyech and Pulisic for Antony from Ajax or Chiesa from Juventus?
Oh, this is a tough question. To be honest with you, I think I probably would. And it's not more so a reflection, well, I suppose it is a reflection of Ziyech and Pulisic, but I just think the other two are more dynamic. And although I think Chiesa, I don't know necessarily if he's having a little bit of a dip this season. To be honest with you, I've not seen him an absolute awful ton.
He's injured as well too. Yeah.
Yeah. Did we play him? I think didn't Reece James put him in his pocket, or he put some young Italians. Yeah. So again, I'm not suggesting that he's not a good player because Reece James pocketed him, because he tends to do that to quite a few people. But Antony, I like at Ajax, and Chiesa, I would just say, given the fact that I think he's a little bit more of a natural goal threat than our players, I think possibly he would come in as well. But I do like Antony. I think he's very, very tricky. Has the kind of skill set that we lack, which is somebody who is very, very willing to receive and drive at defenders. I think at the moment we've got players who are very, very reluctant to drive and commit and try and beat players one-on-one and actually take that opportunity when we have them. Number of times last night where somebody like Callum had really good opportunity to go at Tarek or to go at the right centre back and chose to sort of slow down the play and then play a pass back to Marcos Alonso. So I want someone maybe with a bit more confidence, a little bit more of an aggressive mindset in those positions. I think that would also help us when it comes to tempo, because I think the tempo of the team at the moment, how quickly we play the ball forward is virtually 0 miles an hour. It's not progressing up the pitch quick enough to really hurt teams. And then when we do, if we're going to face teams that have got a back five or a back, basically have 10 men behind the ball, having those 1v1 players with high confidence, with skill, with pace, etc., that will allow you to unlock those doors rather than having a team full of passers up there. I think you need to have some people that have the confidence to dribble, to beat players, and then produce a shot or a pass or cross.
And do you feel like maybe the system consistently produces those spaces for players to be able to isolate their man, go 1v1 and attempt to drive and break the lines a lot more? I mean, I think recently we have been seeing maybe Timo Werner getting more space down the right hand side. Seems a massive waste though that is with Timo Werner, the guy with space. You have to take advantage of those spaces being made, and he's not the type of player that has the ability to get past his man consistently. I mean, he's never really been that guy at all, and it feels like that's just really being wasted. And I do get a little bit surprised by Tuchel's willingness to, continue to use Werner as an option down the right-hand side at times. Maybe speaking about Hudson-Odoi, because I really want to get my personal opinions from you on him. If I'm being serious with you, I'm a little bit disappointed by Hudson-Odoi. I've just been a bit disappointed by his lack of willingness to want to, break the lines, carry the ball. He's always picking the easy option quite a lot, which is either a back pass to the wing back or, putting a cross inside the box instead of really looking to take his man on, or turn on the receiving the half turn, or just be that inspiration to, attract opposition players towards him and free up space for others, which I thought, he was that player beforehand. I mean, what are your thoughts on Hudson-Odoi at this point in time?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, and Nini knows me well, but I'm very unashamedly, pro Cobham when it comes to analysing players and giving certainly young players who've come through the academy maybe a little bit more rope than I would other players before starting to get onto them. But I think watching him last night, and a lot of the frustration, I think, and I think maybe this applies to you as well, Nini, but where you watch somebody a lot in the academy and you see the type of player that they are there, somebody who, you think of the goal that he scored against Liverpool where he ran from the halfway line and beat, 4 or 5 players, or any, the goal in the FA Youth Cup final versus City. There's loads of moments where he has explosion, he beats people, he wants to be aggressive, he is direct, he's willing to run at people. The post-Achilles version of Callum, I just don't see it. And it's a shame because, I genuinely thought when he was coming through that this could be not an Eden Hazard replacement, but somebody that, again, to my point earlier, could be, the sort of the Diet Coke version, has the same sort of approach to the game, can beat players, can go left, can go right.
Take that mantle on
exactly, yeah. Somebody who could be that guy in his early 20s. And yet, as you say, we're seeing a guy here who is incredibly tentative, refuses to take players on, but it does feel like that when you're watching him. Yeah. And the problem that we have, Nini, is that because we create, I think certainly, so few opportunities for those players in 1v1 situations, that you remember what he's not doing a lot. It's a lot more easy to remember that because he might have had 3 or 4 opportunities. If he has 10, 12 opportunities and 7 of them he passes back, but he does 3 amazing things with the other. But because he has so few opportunities, and those opportunities, maybe he does 1 positive thing and 4 things which are quite negative, then that is a perception that I'm starting to get of him as a player. And he was playing in his preferred position. He was playing from the left-hand side, the left wing role that we've seen him play. He had that opportunity with the shot as well. And again, this is another thing that has seemed, kind of deserted him in adult football. For people that maybe, are unfamiliar, he was a very good finisher as an academy player. Yes, he might have had 1 or 2 types of finishes, but he could pull them out the bag. And generally, he was a good finisher, high percentage player. At least testing the goalkeeper, at least working the goalie, getting the shot on target, like the bare minimum requirements of a forward. And yesterday, when the ball dropped to him or when the ball broke to him, I had absolutely no confidence that he was going to hit the target or score. And it's a really sad departure from a player that I had a lot of high hopes for. But at the moment, when you're looking at impact, you're looking at what he's doing, the minutes that he's getting, the starts that he's had, playing in the role that he wants. He has to be a player that you have to start questioning, is he doing enough? And as I say, I really want him to do well. I really want him to be successful. I want him to become the player that I think his pre-Achilles injury talent probably deserved that he should be. We know that he works hard. We know that he has turned down England under 21, invitations to stay at Cobham. We know that he's got a PT. We know that he's doing all these things. But until that confidence comes back into his game, the confidence to take players on, to beat people, to trust his body, to have that burst of acceleration, the things that made him great, then at the moment he is just going to be a very okay Premier League player. And unfortunately, in a team that at the moment that really lacks star quality, that lacks that X factor player, having a bunch of okay players in the final third isn't going to help us win games. And that's really ultimately what it will come down to. Yeah,
for sure. Maybe a part of that, of course, past Achilles, maybe you need a bit more time really to feel mentally comfortable to play.
Yes, like it's where I'm with him. I'm still willing to give him time.
I'm going to put it down to that for now as well. I mean, he's young enough where I feel like we definitely have to have some more patience as well to see. But maybe another part of me, maybe I'm being a bit too cynical, but maybe a part of me also feels like, we are allergic to wanting to concede counter-attacks because, I mean, I think with how our team's set up, it's quite obvious that, this is what we do. I mean, you look at the pass maps afterwards. You go on like between the posts afterwards, you can see what our structure's like a lot of times. You know, the average positions too with players in the field as well. I mean, we are literally one of the middest of block teams out there, and I mean that's amazing for us. In cup games, of course, that's going to give you a massive advantage if you can nullify your position and limit their chances and create things in the transition against them. Of course, in a cup game where things like draws don't exist, that's going to really boost your chances a lot of getting a favourable result in the end. And I think maybe that explains why we get into many cup finals every single season, essentially. But I don't know, like, just start examining things even deeper as well too. I just feel like maybe sometimes the balance of the team is maybe too set towards minimizing the opposition and maybe towards protecting the midfields a lot more. I mean, I think Tuchel himself said it in a press conference. I was a bit surprised that when he did say that, it wasn't really caught up upon more online or on social media and stuff, where I think he really alluded to the fact that the reason why we kind of play like this too is because, we know with certain players in our team, and it's not an insult, it's, every player has their pros and cons, it's football, you know what I mean? You need to play maybe in a certain way to try and minimize that danger against him. And of course, I'm talking about Jorginho. I think, he's a great at what he does. I think he's one of the best in the world at playing on the ground. Amazing first time passes. The players are always constantly going on about how hard he is to press and close down, because when you get close to him, he's already moved the ball away. But I mean, in certain systems, maybe slow tempo possession style games, you want someone like that. But I don't know, I kind of feel too like when you have maybe attacking players that kind of contradict that style of football, it's not like we like Man City, where you have like your little like low center of gravity tricksters who are all very comfortable, dribbling out of spaces, tight spaces, can skip past a man or two, etc., etc. We don't have those guys. We have guys that really made their names in the transition, basically, playing in spaces. And I guess like if you're isolated in the final thirds, you're going to maybe be a lot more measured with your use of the ball, so you then don't have to, maybe potentially give a breakaway against the team.
It's an interesting point, because I think as you were talking though, I was actually picturing, if you think about the split in the team, so you've kind of got the back five and the two holding players, particularly when Jorginho is in there. The whole methodology was about controlled possession. It's about Jorginho recycling the ball, moving the ball. I think the term that I'm hearing people use is influencer in midfield. He influences sort of things left and right, short, changes the passing angles to other players. But then when you think about the strengths, or at least the systems that the attacking players came from, they want to receive the ball. And to be fair, look, Lukaku made 1 million runs last night. He made 1 million runs the other night, and nobody from midfield is going to find him with a pass, because that's not the kind of midfielders that we have. But when you think about Pulisic's strengths, to me, are running in behind, attacking the back post. He is a player who has great movement. Isn't a player that I would want coming short to receive the ball, coming deep. Playing back to goal. He's a player that I want to be like a Mohamed Salah, get in behind, and finish things. Timo Werner, again, exactly the same kind of player. Better when he's running onto things, better when he has space to run into, better when he can attack, 20, 30, 40 meters of space. Lukaku plays on the counter-attack at Inter, won the title, scored an absolute shed load of goals in a system that won the ball and moved the ball forward at incredible pace so that he could have that space to run into. Kai Havertz plays in Germany again, a little bit more technical maybe in terms of the quality, but still hasn't found his role and niche in the league, where there is far less space and it's a lot more compact.
And also like even touching on Kai Havertz as well too. After that first breakout season where he played like as that shadow striker behind the striker, following season for that first half, the season before we signed him, he struggled in the first half of the season playing as a 10 because the spaces are really closed down. Of course, teams looking to snuff out one of Leverkusen's most dangerous players. And in the second half of the season, he played more on the right and a false 9 where there was more spaces to play in. And that's when he came alive again. So he's always been a player for me personally that does do better when there is that space to run into. And I look at the entire team, other than Mason Mount, who, he still doesn't get enough credit, but the fact that he can play like every single role out there, and he's still the best one because he's probably the best at playing in those tight spaces. He has the upper body strength as well. He knows how to move the ball quickly, etc., etc. That's why he hasn't struggled under Tuchel. Yeah, everyone else has in the attack.
And that's the thing, is what you're saying there, is you could say, over 80% of our attackers want the game played at 100% faster than how Chelsea build up with a controlling midfield presence. And I include Cover in there as well. And also Kante to some extent, because Kante isn't going to hit, 50, 60-yard passes over the top, etc. all the time. So where you have a team that, probably the best pass with the ball in that back seven is Thiago Silva. He will play that ball long. But, when you're looking at the sort of the break in the team, you've got players that want to run onto the ball and play with the ball ahead of them. And you've got a team that is built around minimising transition and minimising space in midfield, because we've seen what this team looks like in space under Sarri. We've seen what they look like in space under Lampard. We concede 1 billion goals on the counter-attack because that people can't defend spaces, which is absolutely, as you say, pros and cons of each player. That is an enormous con in the Premier League. If you want to play 4-3-3, you have to be able to defend in space. You have to be able to run, basically. So to minimise that, you've got 3 centre-halves behind, give you extra protection. You've got wing-backs who tuck in, will indent into the system, give you a bit more stability in central areas as well, ability to step in, make that an area compact. It's all about minimising space. But that's the same when you watch us build up play, the amount of times that we'll spend, 10, 15, 20 passes, shifting the ball around various points of the back three, into the midfield, back out again, etc. By the time we eventually get the ball into the areas that, are going to win the game, are going to affect the game, all of our attackers, their strengths are now completely minimised, because not a single one of them, as you say, bar maybe Mason Mount, HAVERTZ on a good day, can really play in tight areas, can play in congested areas, have the creativity, have the passing range, the passing execution, the vision, have the ability to beat a player 1v1, to create a shot, to create a chance, etc. That's not their strengths are finishers. They are guys who run onto the ball. They are guys who want to be playing with the ball ahead of them. And that really, I think, is, again, talking about one of the inherent weaknesses of the system and how it plays in the league in particular, that sense of urgency. And I think teams now, you saw Brighton yesterday, teams who really, really know what they're doing when it comes to pressing and defensive structure. They must have pinched the ball off Jorginho in really bad areas about 4 or 5 times yesterday. Losing possession in really poor areas. And that was, that was a hallmark of Jorginho from a season ago, maybe 2 seasons ago, not so much under the second half of the season under Tuchel, but certainly something that I would associate with him in previous systems. So when you're now starting to see teams are, again, targeting him, when he gets possession, he was a press trigger. As soon as he gets on the ball, somebody rush in, put him under pressure, see if you can force a mistake. We've seen him play some shocking passes back to the goalkeeper and in dangerous areas this season as well. So I think teams are starting to, again, get onto him in terms of possession. But if teams can successfully slow that build-up phase from us, which a lot of teams can do, and it's not particularly difficult to do. You have very, very mediocre teams who quite happily and successfully able to stop us from building up at pace. Doesn't happen all the time. Doesn't mean that they get it right 100% of the time. But if they get it right the majority of the time, again, by the time we actually bypass the press, work the ball into midfield, for example, one of the 10s dropping deep to try and link play, we've already lost that 30, 40 metres of space that we probably needed to get Lukaku in, to get Werner in, to get Pulisic in, and all these other players. So it's not, when you're talking about balance, and I said when I was talking about systems and players not fitting the same style of play, your entire attack wants to go forward. Your entire defence and midfield structure want to play the game in a very controlled, deliberate build-up manner. They want to control the game and progress the ball up the pitch very deliberately, not necessarily slowly on purpose, but it's deliberate, it's accurate, it has to be retained. That there's very little risk there, and that sort of real kind of massive difference between almost the philosophies in the team is why at times we look like, and I felt really like this against Brighton, like it was a team of trialists who had turned up and had never played a game of football with one another. The chemistry was so far apart, particularly the midfield and the attack. Huge, enormous, gaps and spaces, and no real kind of telepathy or feel for where players were going to be, where they were going to drop into, where they wanted the ball. And again, not picking on Ziyech and Lukaku, but that moment that caused a little argument before half time was a prime example of players who don't know where the other player wants to receive the possession, where he wants the ball, where Ziyech is likely to play it. And it happened, a couple of times. We've seen players passing the ball out of play. We've seen people, expecting the wing back to roll onto a pass, but really they wanted to receive it stationary. And all these sorts of little things for me are just indications that there are different ideologies. There are different ways that players understand the game and want to play the game and progress the ball. And it's not necessarily meshing at this point in time.
Yeah. Let's say I was a viewer and I wanted to understand, okay, I'm hearing what you guys are saying about Jorginho, for example, but if he really is this bad, of course, this is a guy that's been nominated, for Ballon d'Ors and nominated for European trophies, and, his role he played for Italy in the Euros. I mean, would you argue that maybe, I mean, I'm not would you argue that's the wrong way I'm phrasing this question, but with Jorginho, why do you think Tuchel really sees a lot of importance behind the player and really believes in him and uses him a lot?
I think Tuchel is a huge believer in defending with the ball, defending with possession. If your opponents don't have the ball, they can't score. And if you're looking to utilize your midfield and their skill set the best, then I certainly think Jorginho is very, very good at that. He's great at pivoting play. He's great at keeping possession. He's great at recycling the ball. And on his best days, and again, I get a lot of grief for not particularly rating him, but I've said on a number of podcasts, I thought in the Champions League last season, that Kante and Jorginho partnership was absolutely excellent. I think Jorginho was great in the Champions League run. In that European style of football, where it's not as psychotically paced as the Premier League, and he doesn't have 400 Brighton players running at him as soon as he touches the ball. That for me was the perfect example of how successful he can be. Kante, obviously, I felt Kante was the best player in that Chelsea side who won the Champions League. I think Jorginho was a fantastic supporting act there and a great support player for him. Played very, very well. Didn't maybe have the greatest of finals, but perhaps didn't need to, because I think Kante, again, Mason Mount were exceptional in that game. But I think as a player, if you want to defend with possession, if you want to place a high emphasis on retaining possession, retaining the ball, moving the ball, pivoting the ball, moving the ball left and right, looking for opportunities, being patient, then that's where he comes in. I think the problem we have, and again, this isn't necessarily a Jorginho issue, but some of the players that he is passing to, particularly the current wing backs, maybe some of the attacking players, our inability to retain possession by getting bundled off the ball, the ball's getting nicked or a toe poked out, for example, that then triggers that counter. And then Jorginho, that's where the problems start, because I think it was Lamptey last night. I mean, Jorginho tried to, I think he tried to slide tackle the centre half one where he missed by, it was like a FIFA slide tackle where you go about 15 seconds too early. Lamptey ran by him like he wasn't on the pitch. It's not his game, and again, that's something that always concerns me. I like my holding midfielder to be able to make those challenges, to be good in one-on-one tackles and situations, be able to cover space. That's why I always prefer someone athletic there. That's why I like Michael Essien as one of my favourites, Mikel and Makelele, guys who are really, really good at that role. But in terms of the positives that he brings, it's all about the possession style of football. The unfortunate thing is that there is a disconnect, I think personally, between the pace that we play at with Jorginho on the pitch, and I'm looking at the Liverpool game here with Kante and Kovacic, where I felt as a pair they were absolutely superb in that game. But you look at the pace that we played in that game with those two being able to move the ball, with being able to drive through midfield, being able to inject pace and dynamism on the ball, both passing and carrying it as well. That's the style of play that I think is more conducive to beating good teams and beating teams that we should be beating, is actually putting our better players in positions where we can actually use our 1v1 skills, get Cover driving with the ball, get Kante driving with the ball through midfield, give them, as you say, problems to think about, rather than wanting to receive the ball from the centre back, play it off at 90-degree angles, bounce it left, right, maybe occasionally turn and play and try and play a pass forward. But sometimes pace and tempo matters, and people always talk about the tempo is not the same when he plays, etc. We're generally quite slow in build up when Jorginho plays, and that is by design, because that is the whole point. We want to control the ball. I mean, we want to move the ball.
We've seen the pointing to imaginary places for players to be in, and then just doing the opposite. I mean, the finger pointing. I just had to find a reason just to bring that in, because I think that's just the one thing that really annoys me about him, to be fair. Because when I look at him finger point, I'm just thinking, what were you really expecting? What did he? That's
really
the
thing, yeah. I mean, I don't mind you pointing, but he's pointing for guys to run into areas that he doesn't have the quality to pass the ball to. Yeah. We know that he can't punch a football between the lines like other players that can play in that role. So telling somebody to go into a really obscure location and then moaning at them for not moving.
Yeah, it's like trying to save your skin or something.
Yeah, and then the other thing as well. Again, I'm not going to go a massive rant about him here because it's happened about 1 billion times in the past. But when he is out of position defensively, or when he doesn't have the legs to get back, but when he asks somebody to come out and do his defending for him, is one of the. I think for somebody who used to play as a DM, it's one of the worst things you could possibly do, is not be in the right position and then get a centre back to run out and try and make a tackle for you because you can't get back. But as I say, I think, Champions League last season, European games, that style of football, and some big games as well, where the tempo is a little less. I generally think he's been, certainly was great in the Champions League run. But I always bring it back to the same point. Manchester City make a point of targeting him. I think other teams who have dynamic midfields will also target him. And there's a reason that he stopped playing in some of the bigger games under Tuchel. Didn't start versus City, didn't start versus Liverpool. Brentford, who have a very, very chaotic and energetic and aggressive midfield, didn't play against them. And I think against Brighton, possibly, was obviously with hindsight, was maybe the wrong decision, because I think they swarmed him in the game and he didn't really influence play in the way that he should. And the last point on him, Nini, for a guy that was voted, Europe's best footballer, whatever the award was, the random award, third in the Ballon d'Or, I think. Did he make the FIFA Pro team, etc.?
Yeah, I think he did. Yeah.
My number one thing for really top players and players that I perceive are really top, like Kante and Hazard and stuff like that. And you said something earlier, which is exactly spot on. Top players make everybody around them so much better. Mm-hmm. They don't need to have a system that absolutely caters to every single one of their strengths and puts other players in the team in bad positions, because their weaknesses are quite glaring and are quite difficult to mask. Yeah. I don't necessarily always see, when I watch Jorginho play, I don't see him elevating others around him. I felt it was Kante in the Champions League run, and even Italy at the Euros. I don't think Jorginho won a Man of the Match award. No. And in the final against England, yes, he did get on the ball, but that was Marco Verratti. I thought Verratti was superb in that as well.
And for me, just to even add to that, I just honestly thought when I saw him miss the penalty, but he had the chance to see it for Italy and have the headlines on him, and then he just kind of messed that penalty up again. I wasn't surprised, to be honest. It sounds like we're being very cynical towards him. Listen,
but he's an absolutely superb human being, by the way. That's I always want to get that in there, because people think that I dislike as a character, as a leader figure, as somebody in the dressing room, everything about him and the bottle that he has to take penalties and the way he takes them, everything on that side of the things, like that, you couldn't get better. You couldn't want more from a player in terms of his attitude and personality. Yeah. He said it's a technical thing for me. It's a technical thing. It's the way he plays the role. It's never really sat well with me. And a physical thing, exactly. Yeah. Those things that don't sit well with me. But as I say, to give him his dues, as I said, I think he's an absolutely cracking personality to have around the club. Obviously very well liked, very well respected player in the dressing room. And, he will always be an incredibly significant part of the Champions League room, which again, my rules, I try not to rip into too many people that have won European Cups for Chelsea, and that includes players like Gary Cahill and Jose Bosingwa and people like that as well. Yeah.
But I guess ultimately, I think the point we're really alluding to is the fact that if we want to move past this horizontal way of playing, and if we want to move past this defending with the ball instead of defending off the ball way of playing, then I guess you have to maybe phase out players like that, to then introduce other players that can maybe suit and get the best out of not only the attack who need that type of verticality with how they play. They look for spaces, they want to roam inside to link up with people and then find another position to pick up, instead of just being out in these rudimentary, pretty static positions quite a lot of the time. To move away from that, you have to phase out Jorginho. Unfortunately, it's not no respect, we don't like him. It's just listen, we're a big club, and I make this point in my video on my match for yesterday. Unfortunately, but we have Man City in this league, which means that they've raised the bar, and it means that if you want to win the league now, the points to win the league is much higher now than how it used to be. And on top of that, with the other teams in the Premier League now, new investment from owners, they all have internationals playing for them. They all play in very intelligent, unique ways themselves. It's a lot harder to win the Premier League now. So it means that every detail, to actually win the league, from being a third place club to a first place club, those details are exponential, and they're even more dramatic, and they're even more important. And the thing is, it's quite obvious that we need to have that balance where the whole squad can kind of suit towards a certain style of football. Yeah. And when you consider that maybe the younger guys really coming through now, it makes more sense for me to stick with them, knowing that, okay, we can now challenge if we make some smart acquisitions and balance the squad out properly for the next 5 to 7 years, instead of for the next 1 year. This is probably the year. I don't think we'd get any new format from a lot of these guys for next season, to be honest. And it's just well, if we do that and have that mentality, we can be phased out by other teams. What if United to wake up one day, have a great window, and boom? Arsenal, Vlahovic, they're looking to get back into things now. They've looked at us introduce their own young players to the team as well. They're starting to enjoy life like the Aubameyangs and other players like that, and they'll probably be better without them for that. And the complexion of the league, our competition, can definitely change in the next few years. And we don't want to be behind reacting to what's happening. We want to assess what we have. We have young players. I'm looking at midfield too. Midfield for me is the key thing. One of the hardest positions to get right, and one of the key ones in terms of giving you the structural platform to be able to mount challenges and win. And when you have Mount, for me, this guy has to move as an 8 back into that midfield position. When you've got Conor Gallagher shown in the league already, one of the best young midfield players in the country. He knows how to score, knows how to get goals. He's another guy that, for me, is a Lampard regen in that sense. He can play that pass, he can play the pre-assist, he can get inside the box, he's a match winner. He's doing that at a very young age for Crystal Palace. And I think other players like Kai Havertz would ultimately benefit more, I think, from playing more as an attacking offensive 8. And now that he can press and work hard, which he wasn't doing at Leverkusen, that gives me more confidence that he can adapt and adjust to a role like that. And we see players do that all the time in the Premier League. You look at someone like Firmino moving from like a cam position to like the false nine role he plays. But to do that, we need to get that right DM. We've got Kante. We can, as long as we keep Kante for 50% of the season with him playing the big games, and then he doesn't have to play every single game week in, week out when you've got Tchouameni behind him, for example, then you've got a real team and that's ready to challenge and put up a real battle against Man City. Because I'm really stressing this, Man City aren't going away anywhere. They aren't going away. They're going to be here. And if we want to win the league, it means that we have to be better than them and we have to beat them. And to do that, what we're doing right now isn't the most effective way at being a team ready to do that. But before I let you continue on, Joe, I've got one more super chat here. JJ Bridgenini, I know you probably discussed Lukaku already, but I wasn't here. Do you think he does enough for the team on the pitch when he's not scoring goals? Now, JJ, we'll get to your question in a second. Joe, man, if you have any thoughts on what I was just saying before.
Yeah, it's a really interesting way to look at it. And, I think, again, when you're talking about the evolution of the team, everyone has probably heard of the phrase, you need to speculate to accumulate. I think when it comes to certainly midfield play, that you have to, I think, certainly look for players who are comfortable or more confident playing in slightly bigger spaces than what we've seen. Yeah. You look at the gaps between our midfield, and certainly when you've got the wing backs tucking in and they're indented, it's a really, really compact system. We know the famous Guardiola meme by now about Chelsea compact, yada yada. It's not entirely untrue. That is the very big strength of the system is that it really does minimise the space that players have to defend. However, if you have, let's say, a player capable of playing as a number 6 by himself, touchline to touchline, has the athletic quality, has all the technical tools to play there, the sort of cascading effect of that on the rest of the team is absolutely enormous. You have a player now who actually, do you know what, I can play 15 meters further ahead, or I can stay wider because I don't have to tuck in, I don't need to come back, or I've got more confidence in this player being able to win a ball in transition. And it's about finding the right medium between the risk and reward. At the moment, we're very low risk, kind of low reward in terms of what we kind of produce during games. Low individual XG. We don't tend to produce incredibly high quality number of quality individual shots. I don't seem to really dominate games. And I say dominate, I mean City just strangle teams in the final third, but we don't have that quality to just relentlessly keep the ball and keep them under pressure, keep them on the back foot. And a lot of what they do comes from their faith and confidence in knowing that actually we can leave the DM where he is, or we can leave, we can play with people, 5 attackers really, really high at the pitch, because we know in transition, we've got the centre backs, we've got the holding player there to do the covering work. And I think when it looked to sort of the way that this Chelsea side will evolve in the future under Tuchel, it has to be about accepting a little bit more risk and a little bit more reward, kind of reward into the style of play. And by getting a holding player in there that, as you say, can not necessarily be a number 6 and just play in a 4-3-3, but even having somebody in that double 6, that pivot at the moment, that really can play touchline to touchline, that really does allow us to be more aggressive in our positioning. It opens up the pitch, and ultimately what Chelsea need to do, in a way of beating low blocks and a way of beating teams who want to play more defensive against us. You can either stretch the pitch vertically, which obviously if a team's playing a low block, sitting on the edge area. You can't stretch a team vertically because there's no space in behind. So you want to try and stretch them as horizontally as possible. So by being, having somebody that you're confident can play in space, doesn't need to have 2-3 players within 10 meters of him. Yeah. Your wing backs can literally stick on the touchline. Your number 10s can go wide. They can go in 15, 20 meters up the pitch because they may have a guy who can punch the ball into them. And all of a sudden now you've got a team that is defending against, Chilwell and Reece James potentially in the future, who are, chalk on the boots, standing on the touchline, making that pitch as wide as possible. You've got your number 10s now who are confident of making a run beyond the striker because they know if they lose the ball, it's not up to them to run back 80 meters to try and win a tackle because, your two central midfielders aren't very good defensively or can't cover the ground. So it's like a mental change in players around them that they feel more free to be more attacking, to take up more aggressive positioning, which in turn obviously impacts how people are defending against them. Teams can't defend the width of their penalty area anymore. They have to go slightly wider. It's all about creating space. If you can't create space vertically, you need to try and create it horizontally across the pitch. And the only reason you can, or the only way, one of the better ways of doing that is having players that are more comfortable playing in wider spaces, because then that way you can actually stretch the pitch and kind of create bigger pockets of space for players. Wouldn't it be great if every time Mount or Havertz, let's say they were playing in those 10 roles, received the ball and didn't have somebody within 3 meters of them to try and kick them up in the air or tackle them. Instead, actually, the centre back is more concerned that actually, Reece James is right on the touchline or has made an amazing run because he knows that the switch is coming or knows that the ball is going to come his way. So he's now more concerned about what's outside him than just all eyes on Mason Mount or all eyes on Havertz or whoever is playing there. It mentally affects the opposition. It affects how people defend against us. And this all literally comes by having a guy or people in that midfield who are comfortable playing in space and are happy to play in space, happy to be a bit more risky in terms of their aggressiveness in possession. That includes passing, dribbling, whatever it might be. And it stretches teams. And that is ultimately one way that we're going to achieve a lot more of a fluidity in attack by creating more space.
And
at the moment,
you're so right what you're saying, man. Like, just to touch upon that, a lot of games that we struggle. I mean, it explains even more now why teams will look to sit back with the very low blocks, keep themselves immovable in the middle, because they know that once we can't stretch teams horizontally like that, then that's it. We're just playing ball to feet or playing in front of defenses is very slow, and there's opportunities there to find the right times to win that ball back, start a counter attack and attack the spaces in behind the wing backs. Now that you don't even have your Jameses or Chilwells anymore now. I mean, but even more susceptible to that at times. So, I think now we to end with the final point as well too. I guess let's try and discuss maybe what are some things that Tuchel can do. Yes, we understand the circumstances, they are not perfect with injuries, COVID cases. I mean, crazy amount of games in a short amount of time too. It's very difficult, and a lot of managers would be struggling with that. And I think reality is, you have a full strength team, which is a luxury in itself, really. But if we did have that, a lot of these results, we wouldn't be seeing that. We're not going to be seeing things like no wins in the past 4 games. Our last 10 games as well too. It's been 5 draws, 3 wins and 2 defeats. It's not form that is going to help you mount a title challenge. Yeah, some people are saying now that if Spurs and Arsenal win all their games, will get above us. But I mean, the chances of them doing that is not that high, in my opinion, to be honest. So I'm not going to be getting too nervous about that. But I think I did have to see ourselves as still like the 3rd best team in the country. But yeah, before I start going off some different tangents, I mean, what are some things Tuchel can address immediately to try and bring some improvements now into the teams to really try and reduce this rut that we're currently in?
I think the single biggest thing that Tuchel can do and I'm not going to say that this is going to massively change the direction of the season, but it gives us let's say a stable starting point in terms of what we're doing for the rest of this year. And that is figure out whose number 9 is. And, somebody asked a really good question about Lukaku earlier. The cascading effect or the impact that the striker selection has at Chelsea is absolutely enormous. Thomas has had, I'm talking about like he's my mate, Tuchel has had.
Man like Tommy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's one of my best. Yeah, he's on the WhatsApp group. He's had an enormous amount of success playing this aggressive, very team-oriented pressing style of football where we press from the front, we press as a unit. We try and pinch the ball. Jorginho can take over high up the pitch, sweeping up that sort of secondary line in midfield. Lukaku, for all the will in the world, is never going to be a player that is going to press and harry and perform those kind of movements. And again, this isn't a criticism of him. It's just a realization that this is the player that we have. So if we are going to play Lukaku and we are still trying to play that style of football, then we're talking about almost a tactical anomaly here. You cannot play a counter-pressing, counter-style of football, or pressing style of football without having a number 9 capable of playing it. So, if it's Havertz or it's Lukaku for the bulk of games, the sooner he comes to that conclusion, the better he's going to be. And I think, again, if you're going to play them as a pair, so the sort of the 4-2-2-2 formation we've kind of seen, and the sort of variations of the build-up play from that. But if you're going with a defined 2, again, figure out who that 2 is going to be and do it soon. Because, again, you look at the Brighton game, compare it to the energy we saw against Liverpool. All right, yes, we drew the game, we went 2-0 down. I felt we were the much better team. I felt we were on the front foot. We were playing with much more energy. We were the team in ascendancy in that game. Compare that to Brighton, no energy. They were playing out from the back after 1 or 2 passes, getting into midfield, getting great one-on-one situations. Cucurella and Lamptey were getting plenty of time on the ball, plenty of time to drive at Aspi and Alonso. So when we're talking about what is maybe the biggest thing he can do, that is to determine the centre forward, because then that will then dictate what kind of team that we have to be to win football matches. If he wants to pick Lukaku, and again, I'm not suggesting Lukaku or Havertz are the right decision here, but if he wants to pick either one of them, then you either pick a team that plays to Lukaku's strengths, and you try to piggyback on the £100 million asset that you've just bought up front, or you relegate Lukaku to the backup role, as much as that will most likely see him depart or want to leave the club in the summer. You make the decision on the basis that you think it's the best for the football club, and that even if Kai Havertz isn't a prolific goal scorer or a prolific creative player, that the way that he plays that number 9 role is more impactful and allows other players to have better games and allows the team to press and to be more aggressive, and then you take that viewpoint. But what we can't do personally is flip between the two, because again, we're talking about building a squad that fits a style of play. We have to figure out a version of this squad, or a version of this starting 11 without Ben Chilwell, with Reece James possibly coming back and maybe taking time to get up to speed. But we have to figure out an 11 here that allows us to comfortably finish in the top 4 for Champions League football. I really want to win the Club World Cup, and then obviously give the absolute utmost we have to retain the European Cup, FA Cup, League Cup, their bonuses. But we have to figure out something. And to be honest, changing between the two of them, changing between Havertz and Lukaku, it has such a drastic impact on the rest of the team that you cannot breed consistency, you cannot breed any sort of chemistry, you cannot create momentum. And the second half of the season is all about momentum. It's about building towards finals. It's about building towards, potentially, moving as far away from the 4th spot as possible in the league. Trying to as best as possible close that gap on City. But we won't do that jumping between styles, systems, shapes, different profiles of forwards, different profiles of this, that, the other. So
no platform for consistency. And
exactly,
let's just say 2 things right now. Of course, in typical meanie fashion, I guess. I can't believe I'm referring myself in the third person. But of course, Spurs, after I said that, have beat Leicester City. 2 Bergwijn goals, 94th, 95th minute to win the game, or 95th, 96th minute, something ridiculous. What was it? Yeah, 95th minute and 96th minute to win 3-2 in the end. So I don't know what the hell happened there. But This is how it starts. This is how the collapse starts. But yeah, jokes aside too. That point you're making about Kai, I do agree from a tactical point of view. He is probably more beneficial to the system. I think you were even saying beforehand as well how, against Brighton, Mount wasn't really. He was working much harder playing with Lukaku compared to when Kai Havertz came on. So I think when you balance up that workload, that's going to be much beneficial for the players and maybe give them more confidence to be in the positions they want to be in to influence the game. But then part of me also thinks, man, at the same time, you're signing someone like Kai Havertz to be playing a supportive Firmino role, where it means that you'll never really take the spotlights in that sense, because you'll always be creating spaces for other players to be in that you're not going to be in yourself. And that in itself eventually is, for someone like Kai Havertz, who's like the hope of Germany, etc., etc., is that's not even the most optimum way to use him, considering that it's only using some of his skill set to bring out others, to bring out the best in others in the team.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Firmino is, he still, obviously, I think he does score more goals than Havertz, or at least he appears to when I watch him play. But to do that sort of central role, and Firmino is kind of he is a false nine, deep kind of, I don't know what the right terminology is these days, that sort of player, but he's still very much a number 9 in a sense that he will make runs in behind, he will sort of spearhead the team. But to be successful in that role, you've got to have Mohamed Salah, you've got to have Sadio Mane around you, because if they didn't have those players and his production remained similar levels, the amount of grief he would be getting, for that style of play. So if you are Havertz and that is going to become your role, is your sort of the glue that makes the front three work, then you need to have people around you that are banging goals. You need to be getting assists. You need to be, I think, tangibly impacting the game. And I think he was working towards that at the back end of last season. I still felt, that I think he's a player that has immense talent, but just really hasn't put it together or figured it out in terms of his overall game, what he wants to be. As you say, is he going to be a sort of a really attacking central midfield in the future? Is he going to be a number 10? Is he going to be a wide player that cuts in on his left foot, whatever that might be? Is he going to be a centre forward? It's going to be difficult, I think, for him to really sort of, as you say, maintain the role that he has in the team now, because he has a transfer fee that puts him in the conversation for being the guy. We've paid enough money for him.
He's our second biggest deal ever in our history. That must
people
mean
forget
something
that
now. That has to mean something when you're paying that much money for someone.
And people forget that because we've got Lukaku, that, if Lukaku starts and we still have a, 70, whatever it is, 80 million pound asset sitting on the bench. As I say, it comes back down to, I think Thomas Tuchel has to make an assessment on what is best for Chelsea Football Club going forward. If it is to try and get the best out of Lukaku, then everything has to be done in terms of the shape and system and build towards getting the best out of him. And obviously, he needs to deliver the goods when that happens. Or, as you say, if it's more towards what we saw at the back end of last season, where we were having success with Havertz playing as a number 9, with Mount surrounding him and Werner and whoever it might be, then that has to be a decision. But it has to come soon, because, again, we've said the word plenty of times on this stream: consistency. We have to have that foundation to build the chemistry, to build the connections in the team, to build the predictability of movement, of where someone's going to receive, what they're likely to do when they receive the ball. Are they just going to play it back to me? Are they going to try and turn? All these sorts of things that come into play. The more we change the combinations, particularly between players who massively and fundamentally change the way that Chelsea play, it's going to be more and more difficult to get that consistency, which would, theoretically, consistency should help us deliver better results. Flitting between system styles, players and stuff like that, it's only going to continue to deliver performances here and there, while we'll probably see a lot of performances that look like the Brighton game, where we may nick a goal, may go on to win the game, but the performance looks like it's from a bunch of players who have never played with each other again. And one very, very quick point, just before we get into the next thing, I don't know if anyone listening would be able to do this, or is something that's of interest to them, but I think that this season, this is the most unique combinations of players that we've seen play for Chelsea. I'm talking about different back threes, different wing backs, different midfield combinations. I'd love to know how many unique starting 11s we've had this season. Because when you look at, for example, minutes played at Liverpool and City, they've got like a core 5-6 players who have played over 1,500, 1,800 minutes, 2,000 minutes, whatever the top threshold is. They have a real core of players who regularly play minutes. I would be surprised if we have players who have played anywhere near that number of minutes for Chelsea, in terms of that real bulk core of top and key players. But also, I have a feeling that we have played so many different combinations of players. Christensen's played right centre-back, middle centre-back. Rudiger's played left and right centre-back. Sarr's played middle and left centre-back. I just think that, again, that is also something that we're not necessarily factoring in, is that we have almost a completely fresh, unique starting 11 that may have never kicked a ball in a professional football game, playing together every single week.
Yeah, you guys, that's a challenge for you guys in the chat right now. I mean, myself, I'm going to whoscore.com to see the minutes real quick right now as you're saying that. But I think that's a very good point as well too. And I don't know, part of me feels like, could be maybe minimize this type of impacts, could be of maybe I know you can't do anything about it right now, but the market, I look at something like Saul, and I keep making the point that, Tuchel's talking about how fatigued the team is, for example. Yeah, there's a player here who's not had COVID, not had any injuries, not had any concerns, and in the league he's got 164 minutes, and you've not ever once called upon him, even with all the players playing under very heavily fatigued conditions right now. A part of me will feel like we could have taken more risks with the team. A lot of times maybe Tuchel overburdened and overloaded players because maybe lacks faith in others, or didn't want to maybe, use some of the youth guys in the team as well, just to help, freshen out the minutes like that. But yeah, a lot of these minutes are really distributed quite evenly quite a lot of the times. And I mean, again, how can you really build that consistency like that? You're not going to be able to. But anyway, before we move on to the last talking point, I do have another super chat right here. 88th bus stop. Thanks for the super chat, bro. Midfielders and wingers that go backwards, strikers with poor control, and 0-3 passes. Not even Pep can win the league with this Chelsea squad. Yeah, we did talk about why we are such a backwards team and such a horizontal team. You might, I think I'll leave some markers at the end of the stream so you guys can find these points a lot easier. But yeah, of course, I mean, I don't think Pep would be able to do anything really unless he's going to make really drastic changes and trying to use some guys from Cobham to help him out there. But I guess, Joe, just to end things, I'll be real with you. Me personally, I'm just getting a tiny bit bored now talking about Lukaku. But I just guess that once you put yourself in the spotlight like that after that interview, you're going to be a talking point for a while, especially when we don't get results going our way. You're getting minimal service, minimal touches in the game. And when you're the most expensive player in the club's history by a considerable margin, I guess naturally there's going to be a lot of eyes on you. Yeah, for the final point, just some of your thoughts on Lukaku. Is this like a 50-50 thing for you? Or do you maybe feel like maybe Tuchel could be doing things to get the best out of him? Or do you feel like Lukaku should be doing a lot better compared to, what the system's giving him?
Yeah, this is quite interesting. I think the thing is with Lukaku, I think to genuinely get the best out of him would require, I don't know, maybe buying 6 new players. And I'm not being, I'm not exaggerating there. Chelsea need better play from central midfield. They need better players around him. Lautaro Martinez is an infinitely better version of Timo Werner when it comes to technical qualities, touch, particularly his first touch and his ability to play in tight spaces and to be that sort of fulcrum that Lukaku plays with. And I think, again, once you've got, maybe 6 is a bit exaggeration, but maybe 4 new players in the team, for example, and then you would then have to concede that Chelsea would largely play as a counter-attacking or a team that are quite happy to spring on the attack. Whether that is a reality in the Premier League, I think we said during the stream as well, there's probably 5 teams in the league that will attack Chelsea or will actually come out and go toe-to-toe. That gives you, another 14 teams that really are quite happy just to sit on the edge of their area and ask you, you're the one with the hundreds of million pounds of talent, come and break us down. Whether Lukaku has been a player that has thrived in that system or in the Premier League in that kind of system, particularly looking back to, we're kind of utilising kind of how Man United did, so that I think the comparison is fair. Looking at his time at United and seeing how he was used there, very similar to how we're using him at the moment. So, when it comes to different tactics and different ways of using him, yes, people go, we should build the team around him. We should be playing to his strengths. My question has always been, well, how do you do that with this group of Chelsea players? Do you, you can't necessarily play on the counter-attack if you've got midfielders who can't play in space, who can't necessarily win possession back. I mean, and also, again, players who concede possession far too easily. A lot of the players, maybe in terms of, names and profile, are maybe not as big as some of their counterparts in the Chelsea team, but they were very good at retaining possession. They were very good at keeping the ball. And ultimately, Inter were using Lukaku for his strengths, which was, again, as you say, ability to counter, ability to get in behind, ability to make those runs. Also giving him the freedom to quite often pull to the right-hand side, when playing with a 2. Martinez would then drift centrally, and Lukaku would almost be as a kind of an inside right or right-sided forward at times. I think we're using him far too much as a 100 million pound version of Olivier Giroud, if I'm being completely honest with you. And again, if you were to ask me the question, who is better at that, then you're questioning, well, if that was the end goal, why did we let Giroud go for for the £1 million or whatever it was? If we just wanted a guy to play off of and play the ball up to hold it up, why have we spent £100 million on a lamppost literally for all intents and purposes? So I think there's a lot of questions from that perspective in terms of how he's being utilised, what he's being asked to do, whether he's being given the freedom to play the way that he would want to, and certainly the way that he got he was so successful in Inter Milan. But then the flip side of that is naturally, as I say, the space and the way that teams play in Serie A, it's more zonal. He has infinitely more space typically in that league. When you look at the goals that he scored, that space doesn't exist in the Premier League. Chelsea do not play teams on a weekly basis that want to go toe to toe, that are happy to push up to the halfway line, that are quite happy to just give him the freedom of the San Siro, for example. And you'll see now, particularly a lot of Premier League centre-backs, they love and they relish the physical challenge of playing against Lukaku. They are very... I saw... I can't remember the centre-back's name, made a massive sliding tackle on Lukaku. And you saw... Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you saw it on the reverse angle replay. He's giving Lukaku some verbals after he's slid in and nailed him. So, these players are taking it as a personal and physical challenge as well. So there's a huge motivation level to stop him from being successful. So it's a style fit for me. I don't think he fits the style of play that made us successful last season. I don't think we have the players to make the style fit him this season. And the other big question is whether that style of play could actually potentially ever exist at Chelsea in the way that we are and the size of club that we are. So it's very difficult for me to see a way where he becomes the 25, 30 goal a season striker that price tag and probably his ability probably demands that he should be. And then, I say it all comes down to the fundamental question of, if he really wants to be here. If he, that I think the interview when he did it, the timing of the interview versus how Chelsea were phasing him back in. I think a little bit of that was quite bad timing. Still shouldn't have done the interview. Let's not get into that debate again. In terms of the way it was done behind the club's back and all this sort of stuff that come out. That is not the way to go about things. Talk to the manager, talk to the club. But I think if he doesn't want to be here, if this is not a place that he wants to be, then they have to find a resolution, because you cannot have a player that is massively impacting the way that Chelsea play and set up and what has worked and what has been successful, having guys like Mason Mount run themselves into the ground because he has an unwillingness or won't press, and that will then, I think, cascade into negativity within the team. We know historically that this group, when it's all vibes FC and everything's fantastic, it's a great place to be. 2 months ago, that Juventus performance, what a game, amazing play. We were in the ascendancy. But this team has, historically, time and time again for years. And again, this isn't on Tuchel. This is a historical thing here that managers have frequently picked at. The mentality when the chips are down is not to put your back against the wall, fight, and try and actually, kind of come out the other side, a little bit better and fight and claw your way back to some sort of respectability. It's down tools. It's throw the manager under the bus. It's arguments in the dressing room. It's not a great place to be. I think certainly from what we've seen historically when the chips are down. So, if Lukaku is, I'm not suggesting that he's creating that kind of atmosphere, but if his presence, as somebody who doesn't want to be there, as somebody who is not working for the team, if that starts to filter through and create that kind of atmosphere, that's very problematic, because it's not just Lukaku. You think at the moment you've got Rudiger for all intents and purposes is looking to leave. Christensen seems like he's looking to leave. Azpilicueta, the club captain, is being courted by teams in Spain. That there doesn't appear to be any movement on the contract there. There's a number of players in this squad, and Ziyech never looks happy when he plays. Just picking people from my head. Pulisic, I can't imagine he's happy with his minutes. I don't imagine. You literally can go through the positions and pick out 5 to 7 players. When you've got a group of players who are playing regularly, or key players or expensive players who don't want to be at the football club, are showing signs of frustration and not feeling the pride and the passion that they should wearing a Chelsea shirt, then it's not a huge like Yadar or some weird kind of social media construct to say that those players are not necessarily players that you want to have in the dressing room, want to be around, want to have on your football pitch, because their minds are elsewhere. They're looking at other moves. They're looking at the next phase of their career. You want them to be in the present. You want them to be part of the collective. You want them to be pulling in the same direction. And it said if Lukaku and some of the other stuff with Rudiger and guys like Christensen, who were prominent players, if that starts to pick away and unravel the close squad that we saw developing in Porto and the Super Cup and the early parts of the season, then that for me, that's where the line has to be drawn and something needs to be done about it. If we're approaching the summer, even if it's a loan move, okay, you've made a massive financial mistake here. The annual cost of the player is enormous, the amortization is enormous, but if he is impacting the dressing room that much, then there's only one solution there. So I think a lot of it is on him, how he reacts, how he continues to perform. I don't think the performance last night was anything to write home about. Again, I would say if you're going to start picking and pointing fingers at Hakim Ziyech and you're going to start visibly being frustrated on the pitch, I would want to see it. I didn't mind it when Diego Costa did it, because Diego Costa won us league titles and scored big and important goals, and he was a presence, and you could see that every single minute on the pitch for him was about kicking and killing people for Chelsea. Like that was clearly evident when it came across. When you start having that kind of that body language and obviously the discussion and the pointing and being frustrated, and you're not living up to your end of the bargain, again, these are all sorts of little things here. And I really want him to succeed. I want him to be successful. I buy into the romanticism of him coming back to what genuinely is his boyhood club. I really kind of felt that message and him coming and returning, and I did feel like he could possibly be a player that would add to the squad. But at the moment, with the interview, and I think with the way that he's maybe kind of played and the connections that he's maybe had with his teammates since that interview's come out, it's difficult, I think, to really be massively supportive of him at this moment in time. Yes, we've spoken about Tuchel hasn't necessarily built the team around him. I've kind of questioned whether we have the players to do that, whether it actually makes sense in the league, whether it's actually possible in the league to do so. But I think, this is something you said to me a little bit earlier today in WhatsApp. We have to find a resolution. And that's really the closing point here is Thomas Tuchel is an incredibly well-paid coach. He's an incredibly intelligent person. He's a fantastic coach. Romelu Lukaku is an incredibly intelligent person. He is, on his day, a fantastic footballer. Scored plenty of goals for Belgium, scored plenty of goals in Milan, still scored plenty of goals in the Premier League. There has to be a way that two very intelligent people can coexist and figure out what is best for the football club, because this isn't Lukaku versus Tuchel in press conferences all the time. This is about the future of Chelsea, football club. And as you say, Tottenham, Arsenal, other teams now are getting a bit of momentum, a bit of steam. Whether they'll win all their games in hand and overtake us is a completely different point in time. But other teams are starting to build a bit of momentum, a bit of cohesion. There's, Arsenal, there's a bit of pride back in them. Tottenham, obviously, big result today, playing them at the weekend. If they get a good result there, then all of a sudden they're looking with their tails up. So you don't want every team having positive momentum and trending upwards, and then we've got this sort of kind of atmosphere at the club, which to say may or may not be due to Lukaku, maybe other players, maybe something, but you can tell something isn't right with the players on the pitch. And whether Tuchel says it's fatigue or there is genuinely some concerns there, I'm not going to make speculation about what it is or whatever, but it doesn't take a genius to say that something isn't quite right with the setup of the team, the players, the interactions, that sort of stuff. So we don't need it to get to that point where it becomes a huge issue. My hope is that you've got two very intelligent guys in Lukaku and Tuchel. They can figure this out and hopefully figure out a way that Lukaku can benefit the team and Tuchel can support him and things start to be a lot better going forward. Let's
hope so. I mean, for me, man, I see it as it being like, I definitely see it like an issue from both parties in that sense. On one hand, I definitely agree with what you're saying. Lukaku does have to improve in certain areas. At least the work rate is something that is a bare minimum type of thing. And, and if you want to be good with your teammates, at least do the bare minimum and make their life a bit easier. And then you can take it baby steps from there. But at the same time, too, I can also see it maybe from his perspective in the sense that, okay, it is your boyhood club. But it's been a few times now where, it hasn't gone to plan. Like the first time you signed for us, you were kind of just like cast aside for nothing. Second time you were trying to sign him again from Everton. But Antonio Conte was very desperate for him as well too. That fell through again. And now that you did come back, of course, risking the wrath of all the Inter Milan fans ruining that relationship that you had there, essentially, to come back here and then, it's not going to plan after hearing, after probably having conversations with Tuchel and the manager to understand how you're going to play. And, we know that for sure there was a lot of assurances he wanted first. So I think that's why the club even gave him the contract they did and made a real statement to make him like the highest paid player in the history. I know they were having a lot of conversations before and it hasn't gone to plan in that sense. So I can understand that frustration on that part too. I think for me, the only thing I would do is that if I was Tuchel, I'd be like, listen, of course there's some difficulties right here. They're not going to get rectified right now. We're not signing anyone in the window.
Yeah.
But believe me, work for this team at least, do that for me, and next summer I'll make sure that we're going to have the assets in this team that's going to get you back to where you want to be, and we're going to make those fundamentals changes, and we're going to make those ruthless decisions, prioritize you, the attack, and other players in this team. I think fundamentally that is the best way to approach this right now. It's the next season's going to be starting in in August again, but the season ends in 4 months, so it's not that far away now, to be honest. So, let's hope that this doesn't really just turn into a sour, bad situation. I think Lukaku definitely is a world-class striker. I think it's fair. We can both admit that he is not being used properly how he should be.
Yeah.
And with how we play horizontal possession, defensive possession football, we're not ever going to get the best out of him ever, really. So
or any of the other forwards as well. It's not just Lukaku's problem. It's the entire attack. They all suffer from the way that we play. Yeah.
Players get frustrated easy, and players with egos. I mean, if you're a player, world-class player like this, there's not many in the world like him. So of course, you really you take your career seriously. You want to make sure you get those assurances. You have your own personal targets. You want to be a top goal scorer. Of course, players like him, they don't want to just get goals. They want to be the ones who are going to lead the charts in the league. And when you feel like you're not able to do that, that's going to then take a mental toll, and then that's going to affect your confidence. And that's something we see quite a lot of times. But before we wrap things up, we do have 2 super chats left. So answer them really quickly. Another one from JJ Bridge. Respect, bro. Chelsea had 13 different scorers this season, most in the Prem, and third most different starting 11s in the league. No consistency for chemistry. It's crazy. He's right. 13 different scorers. Third most different starting 11s in the league as well too. I think I think from last season I've been saying that, small little critiques. And it's funny if I say I've got a critique of Tuchel, I've got a lot of people that interpret that as me always being a low-key hater of Tuchel,
wanting him out immediately.
You know what I mean? Yeah, everything's so black and white with so many people. It's crazy. But yeah, that was something I saw from last season straight away, and I just find it quite interesting that Tuchel will maybe continue to keep tinkering with different front threes, and maybe not even just give faith in a particular front three just for a few games, just in hopes of even maybe some consistency being built. Like, for example, when Pulisic and Ziyech, first time they played together with Lukaku, brand new lineup against Man City, and then he used them on their weaker foots, Ziyech on the left and Pulisic on the right. This is going to be my personal super chat to you, man. I didn't personally understand that attacking move for why Tuchel. Not only I understand why you play them, give rest and Masons, whatever, but then to use them on the opposite flanks, I didn't understand what the benefit really was, other than just maybe defending off the ball.
I mean, this is going to sound very, very simplistic, but if you look at the pace with which we were trying to get the ball into the box, so Ziyech getting one touch out of his feet and trying to get the ball in there, I have a feeling that the plan was to almost just use them as traditional wingers to get the ball into Lukaku, see if we could nick a goal and then defend. And I don't think it was any more complicated than that. Ziyech, as you say, picking the ball from the left-hand side, in-swinging cross, to Lukaku. I can't remember the amount of times he did it, but it was certainly a number of times. Pulisic didn't really get into the game for me. Tuchel is an incredibly talented and incredibly intelligent coach, but he isn't infallible, and nobody is in football. We certainly aren't as football analysts or commentators or content creators, whatever you want to call us. But there are some things, certainly as you say, where you have guys who are traditionally inverted wingers, left foot on the right foot on the left, the usual definition of the word inverted, asking them to play as traditional wingers and effectively spam crosses into Lukaku or get the ball in as quickly as possible. That's stuff that Frank Lampard was absolutely pillared for, millions of crosses, spamming crosses into the box. Is that the only way we can play, etc. Had we scored first, had we nicked a goal, obviously it's a Tuchel masterclass, and we probably win that game 1-0 because De Bruyne scores an absolute worldie, and that was kind of apart from obviously the cover pass to Jack Grealish that maybe he should have done better with. But I mean, beyond that, it was a very, very tight game, very, very controlled game. So I think that was the plan, was to try and get the crosses in on the sort of the normal side, sort of, as you say, that kind of that natural delivery from those angles, versus maybe the sort of cut in and the in-swinger that we see, from Ziyech cutting in from the right-hand side and Pulisic as well. I have to say very quickly that the way that we use Christian Pulisic, I think, is very peculiar. I've always seen him as somebody that a coach at Chelsea should have made every effort to try and convert him into a Mohamed Salah kind of player. And I don't mean that he has the same ability, etc. But if you're looking at his skills, attacking the back post, he's one of the best players at the club for being able to time that run, to attack a back post, to attack across and score. And then also, as you say, that running behind that he can make. City, we've seen goals. We've seen him score goals. We've seen him make some very good runs in behind. But using him as a player, we're using like Eden Hazard, drop deep, pick the ball up, dribble at players. But then he'll lose possession 9 times out of 10, very, very cheaply as well. And then it's counter, and then we're back on the back foot. So I'd love to just see him be used a little bit more like almost like a wide striker. Let him have that ability to make the run. Use him more as a focal point in that respect, because using him either as a traditional right-hand sided player I just don't think he got in the game at all. And then asking him, as you say, to kind of do the Eden Hazard role of being that, like a wide playmaker who comes deep, picks the ball up and drives and does things. It just doesn't work for me. So, there has to be some kind of more, thought, I think, going into how we're using going forward, because he has talents. We've seen that he has ability. I just think at the moment that his skills and probably what Chelsea need, i.e. somebody that can score, we're not using him in the best way to help that problem, which, as I say, I think is getting that ability to attack the back post and that ability to make those runs in behind the blind spot of the right sided centre back and the left back.
Yeah, I think perfectly said, man, and you've really just articulated that for me, so I can just understand, because sometimes it's just natural maybe to even I don't know, feel puzzled yourself. Maybe there was just something clear I wasn't really seeing behind why Tuchel decided that. But I think you're 100% right, to be honest, man. And for the final question, before we wrap things up, Lukaku, aka Reece James, alumni, Welinko, do Chelsea have a spin to build a team rounds? I'm not too sure how to interpret that question, to be honest. Maybe I'm too tired, I'm not realizing. Do Chelsea have a spin to build a team rounds, like a plan to build a team rounds?
I don't understand that. I'm sorry.
Do Chelsea
a spine?
I think there's no E in it. I guess.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. Yeah.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
The short answer is probably no. I think we have the goalie. I think our best centre back is a 37-year-old who obviously is not going to play forever. Kante for me isn't available enough to be considered part of the spine at the moment, and whether that's going to improve in the future, I'll leave that up to you. And Lukaku should be the focal point, but obviously at the moment isn't. So Mendy, maybe it's Mendy. Again, I think Silva at the moment absolutely is. I think he's one of the best players on the pitch for Chelsea at the moment. Yeah. But if we're talking about a spine for the next 2-3 seasons, comparable to Cech, Terry, Lampard, the traditional spine that we always look back to. We don't have the players in that position, I think, certainly. And again, when I'm talking about a player in the spine here, I'm talking about one of the best players in the team who can play at the top level in the Premier League, in the Champions League, who can be counted on to deliver performances in big games, also be a game changer against weaker sides, and elevate those around him. And to be honest with you, as I said, in terms of the midfield play, we don't have that. In terms of the forwards, we don't have that. And at the moment, certainly in that back four, I felt that it's really Thiago Silva is excelling, and I think Mendy is certainly good enough to be in that conversation. Yeah. But going forward, that for me has always been part of the rebuild process, is actually getting that kind of spine in. Reece James, I think, is going to be a fundamental player for Chelsea, but he is more. I don't want to call him an accessory, but as a wing back, as a player who is a full back or a right back. Yes, that position is absolutely increasing in importance in modern football, but I don't think he will ever be the difference between like a Premier League win versus maybe a really, really elite central midfielder, an elite striker, and probably not as much. We've seen the impact that Silva has had on this defence and players around him. A top centre back can massively influence a back three, back five, back four, whatever it's going to be as well. So he probably, he's a key figure in sort of the development of the club because of the stature, the kind of player he is, what he is, I should say, progressing into. I think potentially a world-class player. But if we're looking traditional sense of spine, i.e. being down the middle of the team, key roles, title-winning team, down the middle, then I don't think we necessarily have that many players that I would consider today and also in the future that fit that bill for me.
Okay, perfectly said, man. And again, another point I agree with. And again, I guess we can just pray and hope that this summer, out of all summers, will be the summer to end all summers. And it doesn't even have to be spending like crazy, but just making the right smart acquisitions. I don't think that should... You have to break the bank to do that, to be honest. But yeah, man, I want to say thanks a lot for coming on. Of course, always really enjoy talking football with you. I hope you guys have enjoyed having Joe Tweedie on as well too. I always feel like every time you're on, man, I'm always just like learning something new about the game or having like a new perspective open up. So of course, I appreciate that a lot, and I'm sure that all you guys listening appreciate that type of insight as well too. So yeah, thanks so much, man. Very appreciative. Of course, Ben, can the good people find you?
Yeah, on Twitter at Joe Tweedie, podcasting at London is Blue, so the London is Blue guys. And yeah, I mean, I should be hopefully becoming a little bit more active on socials as we go along here. But yeah, as always, Nini, really enjoyed the conversation, and yeah, hopefully be back on a bit sooner than my last appearance, which I think was quite a while ago. So yeah. I need to get my caps back up. I was doing quite well. Now I need to up the caps again.
It's a new year, man, so we can get that tally back up.
Exactly.
Don't worry. So yeah, you guys, thank you for watching. On that note, I'm Nini FC. This is Blue Line.